We have to keep understanding the developmental process in its purely technical meaning and forget our special circumstances in which we live. This model of resistance economy englobes everything, and its vision must be socially inclusive to include all of the segments of the society, and must reject the economic union with the colonizing power, and in the same time it must reject this asymmetric containment with the Israeli economy, and therefore with more cooperation and creative thinking we can lay for foundations of a progressive sustainable economy, but this process starts mainly by understanding the economy as being more than financial processes for profit and economic exchange. In other words, we can say if the Fayadism is a superior program that works from the top of the pyramid to the base, but the resistance economy works from bottom to top. So if the Fayadism is by its structure, if Fayadism refuses the clashes and any friction with the forces of the occupation, but to the contrary, collaborate with this force and sustain it, the resistance, alternative resistance economy is from the same mud as we are. So it comes from our daily life. I'm not trying to be romantic here, but we have a lot of assets on which we can count. And if Fayadism is about international standards and good governance, the resistance economy must be centered around rights and struggle. And if Fayadism is around individualism, so the resistance economy must focus on the collective action. And someone may say this is unrealistic theoretization, but in order to achieve this, what we need is mass mobilization and respond to their needs and demands, that we need social movements, contingents, political action. And with this, I should remind you of the Palestinian Youth Movement, and I believe that many of you have helped or criticized, but the Palestinian Youth Movement, Palestinians for Dignity, 2 years ago came with their perception of economy or resistance economy, and they were asked about the alternative. They said there is an alternative, which is an economic resistance that ensures fair distribution of resources and social equity, and the process is by full boycotting of Israeli goods and to reject the Protocol of Paris and highly tax imported goods in order to protect our national products and to exploit the land in areas C. So even the youth movements are also trying all of this to achieve the alternative vision, and this requires reproducing the aid system and redefining development and benefit from the local models and give them priority rather than importing ready-to-use models from abroad, and to reject that any development is possible under occupation, and all of this will be reflected on the industry of aid, and which has to be neutral and apolitical. In the end, yes, it is proven that there is a dire need to break the walls of the water tank and to develop an alternative developmental model which takes into account the particularities of the Palestinian society and does not accept ready recipes from international institutions or the donor agencies, not only for the purposes of rejection, but because they have proven to be a failure over the past 20 years, and it has failed in many other developing countries. However, this alternative model will not be ready, but there is a need of political, economic, social, and developmental dialogue which starts from the political zero. That is, it needs to debate on the main issues like representation, legitimacy, and then brave economic decisions will be adopted which shall be concordant with resistance thoughts. And these radical changes in the decision making at the Palestinian level needs full awareness that the current Palestinian leadership is not capable, or actually does not wish to change its agenda. I conclude by saying that the time is off, but we are in dire need to shift from the individual wealth and collective impoverishment to another system which Dr. Fadl Al-Qadim called individual sacrifices and national salvation, because the Palestinian poverty is not insufficiency, but it is the weakness poverty. And if Palestinians themselves are not guaranteed dignity in the aid system, nobody will grant this dignity upon them.
Well, thank you, Ala. And now we can take maybe 5 questions or comments, if you please, so that we try to end on time, despite the fact that the topic is so important. Well, in fact, it is not a question, Ala. Thank you very much, and Samia, thank you very much. I suggest that we take all the questions and then the answers will be together as well, okay? I don't have a question, I have a comment, if you would allow me, and it is more to the organizers more than to the audience. Yesterday I felt this thing, and today I felt it, and in many of the conferences, and with Samia we discussed that in 2010, 2011, there is a there is quite clear that the criticism of so many things that is happening in this country, economically, politically, and other things, but unfortunately this criticism, we are talking to each other, and we are repeating this every year, to an extent that the audience today, well, we have the same balance, the same opinion. So where are we going with this criticism? So for me, this is something provocative, because we feel that we are weak. There has been, we have not heard from the new liberals, from the private sector, from the authority people. We did not hear from the influential people. What do they think of this? And so I would like to ask the conference organizers, based on my experience, I believe that we are in need for bringing the others. We need a dialogue, just not criticism. Yeah. I want to add to what Raja said exactly. The conference in general, when it deals with politics and its influence on the people, the speakers can only be in bias. I am more than Raja. There is a clear bias, very clear bias. Not just blaming, but also bias. Yesterday, in the session of yesterday, post-aggression against Gaza, many things was said about the resistance. The doctor was very clear, and everyone spoke in long. They spoke about resistance and steadfasting, and there were examples that was mentioned by Dr. Abahir. The people in Gaza steadfast, and they were supporting the resistance. The question is, what would have happened if they did not steadfast? What would have the people do? They should have spoken. They should have told how many people were killed. They should have said that we have 1,800,000 people. All the population of Gaza have a psychological, a mental need for treatment. The gentleman yesterday was tried to be realistic when Mr. Muhammad, when he spoke about popularity after the war, and that Netanyahu increased his popularity, and someone commented saying that, "Are you threatening us with Netanyahu?" As if it is wrong to speak about facts on the ground. Mr. Ammar left, unfortunately, but he focused on the decisions and legislations that were taken in Ramallah, and gave some examples and where the mistakes are and some correct things in them. But the decisions were taken, which were taken in Gaza. Yeah, he mentioned them, yes, indeed. But we came to the flogging in the penal code, and we stopped. And he did not continue talking about the decisions. If we go back to the decisions, the education decision regarding the education changes all the social fabric, will change the whole society upside down. This is an issue that we should have discussed. We should have prepared the paper to deal with such a thing. The children who were killed in Gaza, and why do we believe that we are just in the West Bank because we are clear to Ramallah? We can talk about this as if we don't know anything about Gaza. So, Samia and Ala, development, always we hear about and talk about, and it is written, and it's mawju, it is there, and there are rules for it, as Ms. Samia said. But when we talk about the alternatives that Ala spoke about in expanded manner, they need execution and implementation. We have been talking about alternatives for 20 years, and it was clear from very beginning, development from very beginning proved to be problematic. For 20 years ago, we knew that the Paris conference of Paris was unjust for us and will bring catastrophes for us. So from the very beginning, these things were clear. And we are talking about alternatives, and we all know. But we have to reach something on the ground, and say we have to get out with something from these great conferences. Maybe talking in a positive and negative way would have influence. Maybe we have to dig deeper in these conferences. I attended most of the Muwatin conferences, and I have attended other conferences, but unfortunately, I can see the same thing. We are not working towards something better, and we are not taking very clear positions. Our positions are not clear. Even conferences, we are waiting until we have another ISIS here in the country. Okay, bless you. Today I'm more optimistic than before after I have heard Mr. Ala Tartir. And when he said that there is maturity and awareness among the young academics at Birzeit University. And I believe you are among the young people that they form the head of the sphere in in disseminating awareness and adopting the paradigm of young Palestinians and resistance. I have two questions, one for Ms. Samia and one to Ala. My question to Ala, talking today after the aggression, the construction, this is a big title that is much used in the international Palestinian political discourse. What is the Palestinian plan for reconstructing Gaza as an alternative for the plan of reconstructing Gaza under international system and under an international biometric oversight, that everyone in Gaza will have to fill a list with his name, the names of his children, and the area of his room, and so that every bit of cement and iron will be recorded. Is there any chance that we can avoid such oversight on all details of our life? Ms. Samia, regarding the terminology you mentioned, Aslaniya, originalism. I think I have heard it for the second time at Birzeit. It will be nice if you can explain this term, Aslaniya, originalism or fundamental originalism, I believe. And you, Mr. Ala, you used Fayyadism several times. It's good, but can we say that Fayyad is like De Gaulle when we say De Gaullism? De Gaulle has changed in the country. What did Salam Fayyad change to use this Fayyadiyya or Fayyadism term? Thank you. It's clear that that the alternative vision is an expression of political, economic, and social interests, and it expresses ideas of the new liberalism. The suggestion that was made, the political dialogue among the various political groups in order to crystallize economic visions based on alternatives for the development, and to have development based on resistance and social justice. And you considered parties and unions and social movements, including young youth movements, are the entrance for such a change. It seems to me that this really needs more reading to see whether unions, labor unions, for being unions, are really represent the poor people. And also the civil society organizations and parties. Please, in brief, because the number is... Okay, one sentence only. If you both consider that being biased to the poor and to the social justice is sufficient to accentuate a real change in the society, regardless of those who are controlling the actions on the ground. I think this is practically what he meant. We cannot blame the Palestinian resistance at all. Even if there are no rockets in Gaza, the Gaza people were dying out of the siege, and scores of people were dying, and those who were digging the tunnels were dying. What is the question? Can we blame resistance in Lebanon, where 20,000, 30,000 Palestinians died? We cannot blame the resistance. No one blames resistance. Those who should be blamed are those who stood against the resistance. I want to say, if we were 5 people who wanted to establish an agricultural society, where should I go to get permission from that security agency or from the ministry? We are 5 together, and 10 we want to establish a society, and we don't want to register, we don't want to pay taxes. We are having a joint project for the authority. Everything that you do, the authority wants to have a share. So the question, there are someone in Al Arub refugee camp created an invention, or invented a camera on wheels, or mobile camera, and he was attacked by the authority and confiscated. So the authority is not interested in inventions and in creation, but it is interested to keep people dormant. Thanks. Thanks for the speakers, though they caused the frustration. My question is, what the economic development? What are the pillars of economic development? Does it need capital? Does it need consumers, markets, and we as if we say this capitalist is monopolistic, well, the capital is here to make profits, and the national capital also employ people, and they build economy, but they need pro. We noticed recently that we started to tell people to boycott the Israeli products. So the development process and building the society needs time, cannot be done overnight. If we take the first step now, and with Abu Mazen speech, that with the time this can be created. When criticism is made, there should be recommendations made, so that in order to see how can we overcome the problems that we are facing. We have two more. Should we take all the questions? Maha Hurani, bless you. The alternative economic discourse and development under occupation. This is an old one, not since Oslo. It was dealt with in the first Intifada. We used to talk about resistance and resisting economy, and you said much about benefiting from the experiences, and this was also mentioned in this first Intifada. If we are to benefit from lessons and experiences, you did not give us something about the lessons and experiences. Our people in the first Intifada were not so much separate from Israel, and we were not so much changed with agreements. We had a direct occupation that was imposing on us but despite that, we were not able to boycott Israel, and the situation was very bad in First Intifada. The political forces had influence, great influence in the street, whether left or right, and the unions that you speak about had big influence. But despite that, Beit Sahur was not repeated. The strikes in Beit Sahur. And now with Gaza, the last war against Gaza, people and the authority and the people started to boycott Israel. But when the war stopped and we stopped seeing witnesses, martyrs, so things went back to how the situation was. You're talking about alternatives. I haven't seen alternatives except in slogans. Sami has been talking about it for many years. The boycott people have been talking about it for many years. I am not against it, but I want to see how we can really convince people to adopt it. How can I convince a woman in Nablus and that she can buy Laban from Nablus or from, and even, but the raw materials of the product in Nablus comes from Israel, and she knows that her son, the son who works, her son who works in the police, if Israel is boycotted, probably her son will lose his salary. Unfortunately, we are talking emotions. We are not talking economy nor politics. Two questions, quick questions. What is the role of clientelism? What is Ala and Sami did not speak about that. The role of clientelism in killing the spirit of production. As Dr. Sami said, one of the most important factors of steadfastness. When we are productive, not clientelists, not only clientelists to the donor countries, but to the government appointments and things like that. So what she said is an echo of what Raja said. How can we impact the decision making? What is happening in the conference yesterday and today or in other conferences? My suggestion is that at the end of each conference, there should be a mechanism for exerting influence on the decision makers. Like among the most urgent things for us now is to go towards the national unity and activating the leading structure currently. Abu Mazen said yesterday, we will not keep silent at the crimes of the occupation. Why don't we, as a society, as people, as institutions, carry on a sit-in strike tomorrow and the days coming, unless in order to force the government to stop this procrastination of joining doing something against the crimes of Israel. Quick question regarding the development, because two papers on the development when I finished my secondary education 1994 until now, nothing new and nothing changed on the reality. I want to ask the two researchers, Ms. Samia and Mr. Ala, what is the real reality, tangible reality that can be achieved? The situation in Gaza now, 70% or more of families are waiting on the to get the coupons of food distribution. So, what kind of a development can be done? For 20 years, we say that we reject Oslo. We have to work with the farmers, but I have been hearing this for long, but I haven't seen anything. So, what can we do? I want to say that some of the questions asked maybe it's not related to this session. So I would like to ask those who spoke before to come and at the podium in order for a discussion to be deeper, because not all the questions are related to development. Okay, questions were asked, many questions were asked and protracted and long. Maybe they need another lecture. But it is important to understand that development is a process. And therefore, we started, or starting this process will have results, but the results take time. For instance, when we want to increase the productive base, Palestinian productive base through increasing production in the industrial and agricultural sectors, this will not give us results tomorrow morning or reduce unemployment greatly, nor disengaging with Israel and to depend on to stop our dependence on Israel tomorrow. This is a process, and we may see results some 10 years, during 10 years, coming 10 years. If we are committed, we can see the results, economic and social results. For me, as an economist, the production base is very important for me because it is the one that builds economy. What Israel did since 1967, systematically, Israel worked mainly on destroying the Palestinian production base. So, how can I, as a Palestinian, rebuild the production base? If I am chained with the Oslo agreements, we as Palestinians produced or we thought of a tool for boycott, the tool of boycott or BDS. This gives a chance to the Palestinian production. Instead of importing from Israel $4.3 billion, only 600 million of them can 600,000 we can do without from Israel because fuel, we don't produce fuel. This needs a long cooperation from neighboring countries to bring it in. The 600 million, which is half a billion dollars of production, the UNCTAD at Rajas and UNCTAD, if we were able as Palestinians to compensate and produce this locally by boycotting Israel and doing without importing these things from Israel, then 600 million can create 45,000 job opportunities, and this will have great social results. How can we achieve this kind of encouragement for the production? Countries normally impose taxes. Europe added 85% tax on exporting from Africa. It is cheaper to buy from Africa than producing locally, but they impose taxes in order to protect their economy and their local producers. This tax is not available for us as a result of Oslo, but we can resort to other tools. And so what is the role of local boycott in promoting local production is an issue that needs time. Israelis say that they lost 30 millions recently as a result of the boycott. We as Palestinians, I tell you, if we are able, according to the calculations of UNCTAD, if we can do without 600 million dollars imports from Israel, which have local alternatives, then we'll be able to create 45,000 job opportunities. Now, these figures are available. Now, the Palestinian decision should decide whether they want to go this direction or not. If not, then we lose the jobs, we lose the production, and we increase our dependence on Israel. What are the components of development or pillars of development? I tried with Ala to cover this. The most important our colonial situation is to depend self-dependence, self-reliance, and strengthening the Palestinian socially and economically through economic policies and through societal activities of unions and which they were called social bearers. And there is something that is related to the capability of various institutions to represent the people they represent. Do unions really represent, really and seriously and honestly, do they represent the rights and issues related to the workers? We have a big criticism against the unions, labor unions, and to the youth movements and their approach. But we as academics, we draw the attention to, we give examples from the world on how to deal with these things, but our task is to work with the others, work with others so that they implement it, but not we implementing them. How can we influence the decision makers? Well, we always discuss this. We always invite the decision makers. We always try to have the private sector involved. We try, or we should maybe try other methods in communicating with other various components of the society in order to listen to us. The conference that we held at the Birzeit at the cabinet, they asked us for the recommendations, and that was the first time, and we were very happy for that. What the cabinet can do with these recommendations, I don't know, but as for Gaza, the Aslaniya or indigenous Aslaniya and the indigenous people, she means as indigenousness maybe. The lesson that we did not learn in Gaza is that we are not people who were hit by natural disaster like a tsunami. Israel waged a war against Gaza. So, in addition to the reconstruction of Gaza, rebuilding the buildings and opening roads, so we should also demand a political position by the donor countries to exert pressure and to take a position and also for Israel to and for the entitlements to be paid for the reconstruction of Gaza. For learning the lessons of the first intifada. The first intifada, the lesson that we learned in the boycott regarding the boycott is that you should not force people to boycott. This is the lesson. The first intifada, there were decrees issued by the youth that shops should not have Israeli commodities. We have been working for 9 years on this boycott, but never we threatened someone if they bring Israeli commodities. People from themselves on their own conviction should take such a decision. The other difference that we learned is that is related to the international role in boycott. Israel is really terrified by this, and we are surprised. We are surprised by the Israeli fear of the boycott. It is difficult for me to go to the EU to ask them to exempt Israel from all technological proposals. Or I cannot ask the EU to take such a decision that has economic and scientific consequences on Israel if I am not boycotting the Israeli commodities. So, as people who resist Israel and try to recruit the world for to be in solidarity with us, we have to commit to ourselves. The Israelis, for the first time, they negotiate with us to I didn't get this one. If the Palestinians really retreat using this boycott, then they will lose a pressure tool. There's no one tool can really achieve cannot achieve liberation. There are other things like popular resistance, pressurizing Israel, and other things. But we have a tool in our hands that proved effective, and Israel says this tool is effective, which is the boycott. So therefore, we are supposed to use it in a better way. Thank you. Ala, thank you. You answered many of my questions, but regarding the Gaza plan, and this question should be asked for those who are handling this. There is no one plan. Muhammad Mustafa talks about certain plan of $4 billion, and Muhammad Shtayi comes with $1.8 billion, and Robert Siri UN says it evaluates it so and so. So this perplexity is one of the indicators that the people who are coming to it, or the coming developments will be even worse. And I am not part of devising these plans, but once again, I agree with what Mr. Mamdouh said. Dr. Mamdouh said we should possess the development process ourselves, and we should very, very clear. The person who asked, I am not neutral. Of course, I have a position, and I am biased, necessarily biased, because if I am to influence the decision makers, then I should go with clear policies, and I should say that I reject the position of Mazen mandating UN to handle everything. When UN will handle everything, we know how UN is full of corruption and full of bureaucracy. And the most important, and especially in the presidency of Ban Ki-moon, the UN will protect mainly the security of Israel before any developmental process. And therefore, what Sami said, we are not learning from our mistakes. We are bringing another form of occupation, and we are repeating this, which is very annoying, very and even for reconstructing Gaza, this is also an opportunity, and I consider it as an opportunity for the international community to go back and to deal with Hamas and other resistance movements. I ideologically don't agree with Hamas, but they were elected and people elected it, and so the Europeans should deal with it, whether they consider it a terror group or not. It is a body that cannot be ignored. And this is an opportunity as well, so that this gap could be bridged between the Palestinians. It is also an opportunity that Hamas is one of the components of the Palestinian struggle, whether we agree or don't agree with it. And once again, I say that I totally ideologically differ with me and Raja. We spoke if there is something called Fayyadism or not. I didn't bring this term. Someone who is very well renowned and notorious, rather, used this term. So Thomas Friedman, notorious. So the thing that we cannot deny is that there has been changes over the last 7 years. Fayyad is not a magic solution. Fayyad in 2002 was one of the conditions by the World Bank, and he continued and became a minister of finance, but until he became prime minister, the mere appointment of Fayyad as a new liberal then shows the impasse that we have reached. It is not aggrandizing or Fayyad, but there has been developments over the last 7 years that we should see the impact of these policies Raja spoke about and others, which is run tandem to talking about governance and whatever. How can we influence the decision makers? There are many ways, but the culture of dialogue we don't have. We need a culture of dialogue. We have to bring the Prime Minister here and hold him accountable as people and as youth. This is the culture of debate, and without having such a culture, then we will not, as George Ekman said at the beginning, the influence of decision making needs changing the political regime, because current regime doesn't allow. There are no lobbying groups that can access the decision makers or can stand and protest. So we as intellectuals, thinkers, researchers, there are many prescriptions done, but I go back to the main point that there should be a popular movement in order to hold these officials accountable if we want to reach the decision makers. There are many ways, but how to implement the alternative is changing. There's a need for political change. Samia spoke about the youth movement and the unions. When I spoke about it, I spoke about it as a source of hope. If it is represented, if a youth movement that guarantees the popular support for it, because at the end of the day, the youth movement is necessary, because the future is not for the current leaders and leadership, it is for the youth. So whether they are the youth. From the youth, the change will come from youth, and whether Abu Mazen said something or not, no one would listen. We knew all the details. I stop here, but I would like to say that many things I replied. If you visit the network of Palestinian policies, that you can see on the screen. There you have materials in Arabic and in English, and such materials provide answers for things that we were not able, due to the time limits, to answer. As you said, Dr. Clientelism is part and parcel of the Oslo system. How this clientelist system was established before it was built on assistance. It was aimed at thought of how to buy in to give incentives to a number of actors in order to become part of the system. This way of containment, of course, this affects the spirit of production. Uh, you you have not provided the people with an incentive to be creative. What you have done as a Palestinian Authority over the years is that they increased the private sector, but where is the public sector? So this is part of clientelism. So I think the group of monopolies in 1997, 96. So this also impacts the decision making and impacts who affects the decision making when you are as a businessman or private sector. Then, of course, clientelism kills the spirit of production. I don't know. Then thank you all. Thank you for the speakers and thank you for the audience. Thank you so much. Okay.